Welcome to the Third Eye Show, which brings you ancient wisdom as well as cutting-edge investigations into the mysteries of the universe. The Third Eye Show celebrates our diversity, like the unique beauty of each individual wave, and our oneness, like the magnificent ocean from which each wave emerges. We are all one in spirit as we live on this earth plane. The third eye is said to be able to see into the spiritual and psychic realms. At a time when our lives, our country, and our planet are undergoing intense transformations, we will explore topics that will fascinate, enlighten, and empower. Join us as we witness the thrilling ways spirit manifests in our daily lives and the varied paths we choose to create heaven here on our earth. The Third Eye Show is created and offered in love and light.
Welcome to today's Third Eye Show. First, Christopher Penczak, a nationally known teacher, writer, and healing practitioner whose practice draws upon the foundation of modern witchcraft, blended with the wisdom of mystical traditions from across the globe, joins us to discuss his book, The Mystic Foundation, among other things. Next, we showcase the high vibrational song Lighthouse, written and performed by the multi-talented Bonnie Waters. Then we travel to County Cork in the south of Ireland, where we tour the old Cork City Gaol, today a museum, and discuss its history and ghostly inhabitants with the museum's manager, Elizabeth Carnes. Also on hand for the discussion is Catherine Courtney, the coordinator of the World Ghost Convention, which is held every October at the Old Cork Jail. And finally, Meira Findel, who appeared on a previous program to great acclaim, is back with us today to explain prosperity consciousness. This is another jam-packed show, so stay tuned to today's Third Eye Show.
The first thing I wanted to ask you about was about being a writer, because I referred to you once as a writer, and you said, I'm not a writer. You said, I'm a teacher who writes. And yet you have how many books? I think a book just came out today,
yeah,
you
book
said?
12 came out today.
Book 12, okay, book 12 came out today, but you're a teacher and not a writer. So would you speak to that?
It's really interesting that you should ask that, because I've just recently received a message in one of my Samhain rituals about embracing being a writer. So I think if you asked this question maybe 2 weeks ago, I would have given you a different answer than I did today. Originally what I meant by that was I think a lot of people write because they want to write and they feel that they have something to say, and I didn't really start out in that way. I really started out because I wanted to teach people. And in fact, I didn't even really want to teach people. I felt really called to teach people, and people started showing up at my door. So most of the books that I write about really are based on classes and classroom exercises and lesson plans. The books that have been the best have been the ones that have been based on classes. The ones that have been fun books to write but haven't really been my best work are the ones that aren't so much based on the classes. So I really have decided to focus on everything that I teach and writing down what I teach, trying to really produce manuals for people who can't come take the classes, or giving a little bit more detail for the ones who can come.
That's great.
So that's really what I meant by that, although I've really had a very profound experience at Samhain, having this vision, this journey, when my coven did a celebration for the Festival of the Dead in October, for most people call Halloween. And in that exercise, I really went up to what we call the upper world and really seen the heavenly realm, and spoke to a starry goddess in my visions and my meditations. And she really talked about embracing the idea of the bardic traditions, really embracing teaching and magic through word and through voice. And what happened in the past with sacred poetry is a little bit different than what happens now, but the idea that they're all part of the same teaching tradition. So I'm really trying to embrace the idea of being a writer and a teacher at the same time. My practice is both group. It's interesting, it interweaves a couple different strands of it. I definitely have a solitary practice. I do believe in having personal alone time and your spirituality not being solely communal, but I also have a communal practice where I'm involved in several different groups. I'm involved in a coven that is much more of a personal coven, and it's really the people who have known me the longest that I've been practicing with the most. I actually teach classes, and so I'm practicing my craft in those classes. I'm also leading public rituals for those classes, so that's kind of a community event, but it's not so much for my own spiritual growth, but it is to provide a safe space for community to come together and for them to have their experiences. And I also belong to a gay men's spiritual community group, so we practice not all the Sabbats, but maybe 4 out of 8 of them. So I have these 3 different venues, but I also believe in a daily personal spiritual practice. I think that's very important, and that's solitary for me. So some of the moon rituals will be solitary for me. It will be very small groups of people, and then other larger rituals will be community rituals.
But you are connected to a larger community.
Yes, I am.
Which I think is an advantage that you have that a lot of people don't have. From my understanding, for example, I was talking with Laura O'Brien, who wrote Irish Witchcraft from an Irish Witch, and she talked about, at least in her experience in Roscommon, Ireland, in the heart of Ireland, that many practitioners are solitary and don't have covens. They're just not available to them. And I was wondering if you could speak to that. What is the experience here? I mean, as I said, you're connected to a wider community.
Well, I think you'll find the same thing in America. There's a lot of solitary practitioners. There's a lot of people who live in rural areas in the Bible Belt and various places in America where they feel they can't connect to other people. I think you'll be surprised if you feel that you're in that situation. There are a lot more people out there than you think. There's a lot of networking sites online if you have access to being online. Probably one of the best that does community service is a group called The Witch's Voice, and their website's witchvox.com, and they list things by state. So if you want to find a class, a teacher, a coven, a minister to do a hand fasting, child blessing, things like that, they list resources, and people can list themselves if they're available for those services by state. So you might be surprised, and there might be something going on or a community going on that's in your backyard.
We'll run that information for you.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's definitely available for a lot of people. Sometimes solitary practice is preferred. Sometimes, communities can be great, but in any community, a lot of people think just because it's witchcraft or paganism or any form of magical tradition that we're divorced from all the problems that other communities have. And it's sad to say that, when you get a group of people together, you get a group of humans together in any organization, in any religion, in any social or political group, you have problems and you have politics and you have things. So I know a lot of people who've drawn from communities to have more of a solitary practice. I think community is very important. I think particularly educational community is very important. I think if you know something, you have a duty to share and teach and to pass that on, or to really be involved in the community as student and mentor. I think we all have something to teach, and I think we all have something to learn. So I think if we want things to continue to grow, that's really important. Like in the community I teach down in Boston, there's kids that come to the rituals now, which is very different for me because I'm used to running more adult, introspective types of rituals. So now we have to kind of provide a place for the kids who are growing up as witches and growing up as pagans, which is it's an interesting thing. And I'm not a parent, so I can't relate to that on a personal level, but they're a part of my community. So, I think of how I was raised Catholic, and so many people come into witchcraft and paganism and any form of non-traditional spirituality from something more traditional. And they weren't really raised with anything that they're practicing now. So it's really interesting to see the adults, how they're raising their children, and I think we need to provide community areas for that. There's a lot of good work in the New Hampshire area. There's an organization called Spiral Scouts. And they're kind of like a Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts for pagan kids. Oh. So there's a lot of stuff that's out there that you just have to kind of go looking for.
That's great. So when you're writing, are you keeping those people in mind, the solitary practitioners? I would think you are.
Definitely. I mean, a lot of my primary books, particularly on a lot of the witchcraft, has been about really the course books of what I put my students through. But a lot of people can't come to those classes, or if I'm doing weekly classes and people live further away, they can't come out. So I really wanted to create something that people could use as a study guide, solitary or in small groups without a teacher. So I definitely keep that in mind, and different books have different age-appropriate levels. Like I have a teen boys book that came out called Sons of the Goddess. So I was primarily writing for that market, although I've had a lot of people from all ages and genders really identifying with that book. One of my more recent books called The Mystic Foundation was really about, you're interested in all of this, but you don't really know what you want to do or what path you want to pick. So that was written kind of for a general audience. And right now I have some more advanced books coming out about advanced topics in witchcraft. I had a book called The Temple of Shamanic Witchcraft, which is advanced healing in spirit work. And the one that comes out this week is called The Temple of High Witchcraft, and it's about ceremonial magic, which is pretty advanced technique for a lot of people. And it's how do you put that into your witchcraft practice.
That's great. So if someone is a solitary practitioner, he and she can, or she can sort of follow along
Exactly.
and grow. So you're anticipating their growth.
Yeah, there's a lot of 101 and introductory books out there, and the biggest complaint people have in the pagan community is we don't want another book in the Wheel of the Year, we don't want another spell book. And those things sell because a lot of people stay at that 101 level. They buy a lot of books, but they don't practice a lot of it. So I've really tried to put out a program that's about practice, and you can go from step 1 to step 2 to step 3. All the exercises are written in that way. The books are structured. It's going to be a 5-book series based on the Temple of Witchcraft books that I do is a 5-book series based on the 5 levels I teach. And one of the biggest drawbacks people have had is that if they don't have a teacher, they feel they can't do the meditations and rituals on their own. So I've put out CD companions that go to each of those books. So there's 4 CDs in each companion. And all you have to do is find track 1, and that puts in exercise 1, and it's me guiding you through it. You know, so it's like having a teacher there. So really, if you're alone and you feel like you don't have the guidance for this, there's not a lot of excuses to not sit up and try to have the experience of it. And if you can have the experience, you'll go deeper, and you'll be able to apply the information of other books and other teachings. And I want to write really for witchcraft teachers and mystical teachers in general, but you have to get them to that place to appreciate that. So you have to start at the basics, but if you keep on writing the basics, then you're never going to progress, and your readership will never progress.
So you've got a lot more books in your mind.
I have a lot planned in my mind, yes. I'm going to be busy for a long time.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
I'm a big believer in spiritual literacy, and the idea that we need to know, even if we choose not to practice a particular religion, we need to know some basics. Particularly not just religious literacy, which I think is important, but for me, mystical, spiritual literacy. The idea that there's certain ways that as a human our energy bodies work, our psyches work, the way that we interact with the universe. And you find them in most mystical traditions, the idea and the understanding of how the soul integrates with the body, the idea of the 4 elements of earth, air, fire, and water, the balance of male and female energies, simple basic protection, grounding, understanding what spirits are and how to best work with them. Those are things that are found all across the world, yet particularly in modern America, we're not really educated on all that. So what I really tried to do with Mystic Foundation was no matter what culture you come from, no matter what your religious persuasion is, what are the basics? What are the 101 of just spiritual literacy or mystical literacy? So you can really have those experiences from whatever background or no background at all. You don't have to name yourself something. You don't have to choose a particular path. But if you were to walk in, I teach a lot of metaphysical stores. And at those stores, if you were to walk in and never been in one before, and you looked around, and in one corner they have this Asian section and Feng Shui and acupuncture, and then they have holistic health and massage and crystals and flower essences and essential oils, and then a witchcraft section, and what's that all about? And then Christianity and goddess religions, and didn't know where to begin. I wanted a book that would kind of give you an overview of all those different things and say, how do I prevent getting overwhelmed by energy? How do I get prevented from feeling imbalanced or sick? How do I de-stress? How do I center myself? And those are things that are really constants for all magical traditions, all mystical traditions. So that's why I chose the word mystic, and that's why I really focused on the idea of just this basic mystical literacy for everyone.
Now, would you mind defining the word mystic?
Sure. From my perspective in the book, a mystic is someone who really seeks to have a direct experience with the divine, however you choose to see the divine, but you want to interact directly with the divine, which I think is very important. I think religions can be really divided. They can be divided in many different ways, but primary way that I look at how religions are divided are there more denominational religions or more prophetic religions that are based on someone else's experience, and they have a revelation and they write it down and they teach that. And those are more of the orthodox religions, which can be great and can show a lot of beauty. But there's also the experience within orthodox religions and non-mainstream religions, the idea of how do you have your own prophecy, how do you have your own vision, how do you have your own experience of spirit. And then what are the hallmarks to figure out, well, was this a true experience? Was this my ego coming into it? Was it profound for me and maybe nobody else? And as long as it's profound for me, then go forward and use it.
That's fine.
So I see a mystic as someone who seeks those out. And the East, mysticism is really much more honored than it is in the West. A lot of people don't think of mysticism as a vocation. Like, unless you join to become a priest, a nun, a brother, a reverend of some sort, it's very hard to think of devoting your life to mysticism, where in the Eastern cultures and in the ancient cultures, they had temples where people would withdraw and have that be their primary focus in life.
Mm-hmm.
So as modern people, we have to figure out, how can I have a mystical vocation and also a 9-to-5 job and raise a family and relationships and all that, which is difficult, but I think it's important we integrate the two in this life.
I think you're absolutely right about that, Christopher, and I think that if more people were focused on that, the world would certainly be a better place.
I agree.
But I think it's happening.
I do too.
I think it's
I
happening.
think there's
The
a great shift
vibration
happening.
yes.
Yeah.
Would you like to talk about that?
Oh, certainly. Well, I mean, we often talk about what we do as being New Age. You've probably heard, we've all heard
Sure.
that term. And a lot of people shy away from that term. And I've got friends who are what I call, and maybe I should discuss this term a little bit, but I consider myself also an occultist. And I have a lot of friends who are occultists. And people hear that word, and just like witch, they kind of shudder and think, ooh, that sounds dark and bad. But an occultist simply means someone who studies the things that are hidden. It comes from the word ocular. It's the things that are unseen. And I have friends that are occultists that kind of shy away from the label New Age, because they think New Age has been equated with things that are fluffy and don't have a lot of substance or depth or history to it. But really, I love the term New Age, or I have a magical tradition, and the works of Aleister Crowley, they call it the New Aeon. So some people like saying the New Aeon instead of the New Age, but it's the idea that we're coming into a shift in consciousness. Some people relate it to the Mayan calendar and say it's going to happen in 2012. Other people relate it to the prophecies of Christianity. Other people relate it to other ancient prophecies. Probably my favorite way of looking at it is through astrology. So I think astrology is one of those constants that we have both sides of the world in all different time periods, and it doesn't have a particular culture or religion associated with it. And in astrology, they say that we're entering the age of Aquarius. And every 2,000 years or so is ruled by a particular astrological sign, and it goes backwards through something called the precession of the equinoxes. And basically, it's kind of like a great month in our cosmic calendar. So the last 2,000 years have been ruled by Pisces, and Pisces' kind of characteristics are unconditional love, which really is the essence of it. It's that spiritual merging, unconditional love. Yet other qualities are self-sacrifice, martyrdom, dualism, disillusionment, addiction, institutions, hierarchical authority, because there's this sense of above and below. And so Christianity has really been like one of the dominant forces of the last 2,000 years. And its best example is that sense of unconditional love, sacrifice for a greater good, all the kind of best teachings of Christ. Yet its dark side has also been manifest. Institutions that are controlling, hierarchical authority, martyrdom, really kind of the darker side of Pisces too. And so we're entering a new age, and we have an opportunity to exemplify both the best and try to avoid the worst of Aquarius, which is the next age that we're going into, the next 2,000 years. And Aquarius is supposed to be this really great universal time of brotherhood, sisterhood. A lot of prophecies have been focused around this time, and they basically say we're entering this golden age, this age of light, this age when everyone will have equality, brotherhood, sisterhood. Yet the dark side of Aquarius too is revolutions, and it could be revolutions of the mind, which is great, or it could be revolutions of blood and war, which aren't so great. It's about sudden and swift changes, which could be sudden and swift cultural changes, or it could be sudden and swift catastrophic earth changes that people have been predicting. Really the idea behind the shift of ages is where the collective consciousness of people are at that time governs how the change will come. So these revolutions and shifts and big cataclysms can come internally and change us all, or they can happen externally to change us all. So I'm voting for the internal changes.
I'm with you. I'll second that emotion.
But that's really where the New Age comes from.
In the Mystic Foundation, you said the wonderful lesson in exploring multiple views is to know that there are many truths in the world, and none are mutually exclusive. Each model seems to work for the practitioners using it. And I really love that, because I know you have a particular point of view, and yet you're wide open and respect all traditions. That's what I'm getting from this. You're talking about many paths, one journey.
Right.
So would you talk about that?
I think it's really important to realize, whether it's a magical system, a mystical system, a religious tradition, that we're really working from an idea that they're all paradigms, they're all systems. No one system can encompass the entire truth. No one tradition can have a mutually exclusive view of the truth. I think when you start to work in a system gives you grounding, a system gives you foundation, gives you a way of looking at the universe so you can operate. But it's like looking at an object, and if we're all looking at one object, in a room, if it's in the center of the room, we've got a crowded group of people, we're each going to look at it in a slightly different way. We're each going to have a different perspective on it. That object is the truth, the spirituality, is enlightenment, whatever word you want to use for it. We're all going to see it slightly differently. We're all going to approach it a different way. Like some people use the idea of the mountain. And the spiritual enlightenment is at the top of the mountain, yet everybody climbs a different path. And I think that's really important. And there's some major paths, like everybody that's in one corner of the room is going to approach it generally one way. Everybody in the opposite corner is going to approach it a different way. So Christianity has validity. Judaism has validity. Witchcraft has validity. Buddhism has validity. Hinduism, Native American, they all have a validity, and they all represent an approach. But even people in a particular tradition are going to have a different perspective to it. So I think if you don't get so attached to your system as being the truth, but your system's a paradigm to approach the truth, you become much less fundamental. I think there's a fear of being fundamental in any religion, in any tradition. And this really kind of gives you the idea that, as long as the person's doing their work and they're approaching the truth, then they're going to find it. All roads lead to the truth. Just some take longer than others, and that's okay. Sometimes it's the journey, it's not the destination.
We need all of us. We need all of our points of view. We need all of our journeys.
I agree.
We're all helping each other because ultimately we are all the same soul. We're all the same spirit. So you've said, talking about opening up psychically, and a lot of the exercises in the Mystic Foundation are exercises that will protect you, that will open you psychically, and so on. And you have said that fear is the biggest block to opening. Let me see if I've got it here. The biggest obstacle to spiritual growth and mystical understanding is fear. And people are also afraid of opening up psychically. Why do you think this fear exists, and what do you think about that? Would you speak to that?
Well, I think, quoting a teacher and kind of a basic spiritual truth, is that the two forces that we have in the world are expansion and contraction in many ways. And love is really what causes us to expand, and fear is really what causes us to contract. I'm not saying that all fears are bad. There's what I like to call sacred fears. There's certain fears that tell you you're in danger, get the heck out of there because you're in danger. There's fears that say don't trust this person or this place, and those should be honored. But they're not constant states of being. When someone's constantly in a state of fear, that's what I'm talking about. And fear contracts you. And when you expand your consciousness, when you expand your insight, psychic development, it's a form of expanding your insight, touching the divine directly, getting direct knowledge. And when you have those experiences, you venture out into territories that are unknown. You become larger than what you're used to. Your consciousness expands, so you're bigger than what you've always known. And as you expand, that's new. And to do something new is terrifying for a lot of people. To go someplace they haven't gone before, to become larger than what they thought or who they were told that they were, that's a frightening thing. So a lot of people embrace the fear because it keeps them where they are, and that's safe, and that's normal, and that's what's known for them. And really what we need to do is to be able to fearlessly venture out into the unknown, to know that we are part of the divine and that whatever we open to is what we need. I think a lot of people psychically open up in ways that have been unhealthy, through trauma, through shock, through uncontrolled drug experiences, through having immense talent and no background in their society to say this is what you do with it. So there's a lot of fear around that. Is it going to happen in a way that I can't control? Am I going to be hurt by it? Are the spirits going to come by and hurt me? Or am I going to be cast out for it? So it's really the idea of being able to trust your sense and trust your sense of power.
People often talk about today, they talk about the fact that spirituality seems to be out of balance. And that we need to bring the divine feminine into the equation to balance that energy. And you speak of this as the principle of gender.
Yes.
Would you mind talking about that a little bit, talking
Certainly.
about what it is and why it's important?
Well, the principle of gender is actually one of the 7 principles in something called the Hermetic Principles. It goes to a book that was published about 100 years ago called the Kabbalion. And the Kabbalion outlines 7 basic principles on how the universe is supposed to work, of basically how everything's put together. And one of those principles is the principle of gender. And it basically is summed up that everything has its masculine and feminine energies in a balanced proportion. So each of us has male and female energies. Everything animate and inanimate in the world has qualities that we describe as male and female. In the last 2,000 years or so in our religion, and even quite a bit before that, there's been much more of a dominance of looking at the divine as masculine. And in fact, for most of us, what we say when we kind of use a default name for the divine or the creative spirit, we say God, which is technically a masculine term. And often we related a lot of things to masculinity as being spiritual. And I actually call it a polarity wheel when we talk about it. And you take different qualities like male and female. And then you also have up and down. And you can also have light and dark, or sun and moon. And you start to have all these polarities. And somehow in our consciousness and our culture, we've taken all the things on one side of the wheel and smushed them together. And so things that are bright, light, white, up, above, masculine, have all been kind of equated together. And everything that has been underworld, dark, feminine, rich, fertile, has been equated with kind of a darker side, and sometimes even evil. We associate the above. Even when we talk about the divine, we look up. But from a witch's perspective, the divine is just as much down as it is up, and we see everything as divine. So I really feel one of the reasons why witchcraft has become so popular in the last century and going into the new age that we have is that we really need to bring back the feminine principles. And you find it in all religions. In Hinduism, we talked about the Shiva and the Shakti force. In Taoism, it's not so personal. It's not seen as God and goddess, but it's the yin and the yang. So we have both of those. Even in early Christianity, we had the concept of what was called the Holy Sophia. In Christianized, Kabbalist, alchemy in the Middle Ages, we had this concept of the soul of the world, the anima mundi, which is Mother Earth. And that was seen as a divine principle that was part of what the alchemists worked with. So I think part of it is trying to get back. All the mystical traditions tend to relate to male and females coming from one source, but both sides being honored. And I think we've kind of forgotten that in mainstream culture. So we need to really honor our mother, honor the divine mother, honor our personal mother, and really see things in the dark and in the night as divine, just as much as the day and the light.
I think you're absolutely right. But you know, I think that on an instinctive level, most of us know this, although we may not know it consciously, because I've noticed that when artists draw angels, they tend to draw them androgynously. And I think that's because they're in perfect balance. And so they would appear androgynous. And so somehow, on some instinctive level, they know this.
Right.
But they probably don't know it consciously.
Although I think it's very interesting, too, if you go back to the earliest references of angels, they're much more animalistic and primal. Like if you really read Old Testament, they've got, 900 eyes and hoofs, and they're much more pagan, animalistic, almost totemic in some ways than they are human. So it also shows the sacredness that's in nature, that things aren't always having to be human to be divine, or humanoid to be divine. But I think you're right. I think angels are neither male nor female. I think that's why we go for that androgynous. I really think of them as vortexes of light. We just try to personify them in some way.
I think ultimately we are neither male nor female.
Right. A lot of traditions, and some earlier traditions of witchcraft, are really hung up on the idea of the divine male and the divine female being gender roles. And there's very strict roles for priestesses and priests. And now it's really changed, and a lot of modern witches really have a lot of fluidity to what the role of the priestess is and what the role of the priest is, but we're honoring both. We're honoring both the Great Mother and the Great Father. In some of our traditions, we call it Lady and Lord. So we look at the divine as both Lady and Lord, or Goddess and God, and see the divine as we're all expressions of the Lady and Lord.
Very interesting. And you mentioned Star Wars in the Mystic Foundation.
Yes,
you mentioned it. I made a note of it because I was kind of startled to see it. and how Star Wars sort of talks about this.
Yes, Star Wars, well, it's one of the classic hero stories. Joseph Campbell actually talks a lot about this in his work. And that the basic themes of the hero get played over and over again. And in our modern culture, we don't really have old myths. Like, if you lived in ancient Celtic times, you had certain stories that you knew were about your people and how the world worked and what signs and symbols meant. If you lived in ancient Greece or Native American tribes, you all had kind of specific stories. Our culture draws on all those cultures. So we know a little Greek mythology, we know a little Celtic mythology, we know a little Egyptian, but we don't really have our own mythos. And I think our own mythos really is Hollywood, TV, movies, modern culture. I think even for a lot of us, comic books have been a great influence for me.
I was thinking of Superman.
Yeah, well, there's a great adult comic book in the sense that it deals with spiritual themes called The Sandman. And I think he really rose to the challenge of Joseph Campbell said no one's really created the gods of the New Age. And I think in some ways this author, Neil Gaiman, did. He writes a lot of spiritual topics in science fiction-y kind of terms. And I think Superman, the archetypes of the different Legion of Superheroes and Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four, they're very primal archetypes. And I think Star Wars really speaks to that as well. I mean, it's really the story of the hero leaving his naivete behind and leaving the farm. He was like the country farmer in a space way, but he's a moisture farmer on Tatooine, and having to go and face the darkness of his father, which represents his shadow, which is something all mystics have to face. What's the part of you that's repressed? What's the part of you that doesn't want to see how things really are in the world, and then how do you integrate the light and the dark, and then become a whole person, become a whole human. So I really think that's the story of it's the same thing in Hercules, it's the same thing in Gilgamesh, it's the same thing with Luke Skywalker.
Luke Skywalker, I bet you hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it's very, and it talks a lot about, in the end, we think of it as polarity as being this good versus evil, yet at the end it's about integration. You know, that Luke had to take. A lot of people miss this part of the story, but he had to integrate the light side and the dark side. He had to kind of cross over and come back again to be a whole person. I think if you try to be absolutely good or absolutely evil in the way that we define it, you kind of lose sight in what's real. And I think that was really what the story was about. And a lot of people, it was about the whole prophecy that's in that mythos is that, you know, Darth Vader was supposed to be the one to bring balance to the Force. And in the end he did. You know, he went to the dark side and then redeemed himself at the end. And I think his son was much the same way. So it's about that balance. It's about that harmony. It's not about absolute goods and absolute evils, or there's an absolute right and wrong. It's about doing what's best in balance.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you.
I wish we had more time. There's so many more things I'd love to ask you. Maybe we'll get you to come back sometime.
I would love to come back. That'd be great. That'd be great.
But I do want to say that I have enjoyed the Mystic Foundation very much. I think that you are a profound thinker.
Thank you.
I think that you have a lot to offer the world, and if you haven't read any of Christopher's books, I suggest that you do. There's a lot to think about, and there's a lot to learn. Whether you're Wiccan or not, there's a lot to learn from Christopher, and I thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Blessed be.
You're watching The Third Eye Show.
My love is a light that shines forever, forever. My love is a star that glows forever, forever. And through the days of darkest storm, no, my love goes on and on. My love is a light that shines forever, forever. My love is a flame that lives forever, forever. And though the night may seem so long, no, my love goes on and on. My love is a light that shines forever, forever, forever.
You're watching The Third Eye Show. For 100 years, pickpockets, petty thieves, and even political prisoners, men, women, and children as young as 9 years old, were incarcerated here in the Cork City Jail. Although for some, life here must have been preferable to the crushing misery of life in the gutter. Nevertheless, imagine the despair that traveled down these cold corridors. Even today, when the jail is enjoying a renaissance as a museum, a center of history and heritage, echoes of those sad days linger on. And so, perhaps, it is a fitting venue for the World Ghost Convention, held each October and founded by Richard T. Cook. One sunny morning in Cork, we caught up with Elizabeth Carnes, the manager of the Cork City Gaol, and Catherine Courtney, festival coordinator for the World Ghost Convention. Can you tell me what it's like to work in a jail that is reputedly full of spirits?
Well, it's an amazing place to work, very different, as you say, than your usual high-rise office. And it's just that you're never alone here. Even if you're in the building or a section of the building on your own, you know there is somebody else there, a presence, but not threatening, just comfort. You're never alone here.
Have you had any personal encounters with any of the spirits here?
Well, I have. Before I came to work in the Cork City Gaol, I didn't believe in spirits. I didn't mind if other people did, but personally I didn't. But not long after I was here, I began to feel somebody passing me in the corridor, and there would be kind of a shh sound, like taffeta passing you by. And I didn't see anything, but I would hear this rustling sound and feel somebody going by, like a long skirt passing you. And then a few months after we opened, I actually thought I heard a child crying for its mother, and I thought, a lost child, I better go and see what this is about. And when I walked out into the West Wing, I encountered this figure of a woman, and she was very tall, very thin, and no eye contact. She just walked along, and gradually there was just half of her, and then she was disappeared into the wall. Now, we called her Olive because she wore an olive green shawl and a long black skirt and black hair piled high and a little cap on the top, black. And we called her Olive after the colour of the shawl. And quite a few people actually met Olive over a number of years. Now, we did have a lot of prayers said, and Olive actually went on her way. As again, nothing sinister, but then there was another lady we called the matron because she was in a royal blue, and she was encountered several places throughout the jail. So they're the most visible. Funny enough, it's always male voices, but anything that has been seen has been female. The first encounter with children was about 3 years ago, and again it was I was in the middle of giving a guided tour, and my back was to the wall, so nobody could be behind me, and my jacket was given a few very firm tugs. You know the way a child would urge its mother to move on if she was talking to somebody, sort of get on with it. And the second experience was in our small retail area, where we had particular souvenirs, and somebody was playing with these. There was music and that coming from these singing teddy bears or leprechauns or something. And one day I was going through, and I was just having a very busy day, and I said, for heaven's sake, stop. And right in the middle, silence. So it had to be children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you didn't believe in spirits when you took this job, but
No,
you
I
do
didn't.
now.
Oh, I do very definitely, but I don't have a problem with them.
But
I'm
you're not
afraid
afraid
of
of
the living, not the dead. And there's nothing sinister here.
Catherine, if we can turn to you for a moment now. Now you are the coordinator, festival coordinator for the World Ghost Convention. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. This is our 7th year. It's the 7th World Ghost Convention, and it's become a very popular event every year. And I'll just give you a brief background to it. It was founded by Dr. Richard T. Cook, who's well known in the psychology, heritage and music field, and over the years people had been relating to Richard their own personal supernatural experiences, and this led him to establishing the first Ghost Convention in the year 2000. And there was such a tremendous response to this first Ghost Convention that has become an annual event, and it is launched every year by the Right Honourable Lord Mayor of Cork, and also is part of the Irish Ghost Family Festival.
And it's held right here in the Cork City Jail.
That's right,
correct?
yes indeed. It's an ideal location as it has its own resident ghosts, which have been seen by members of the audience and speakers since the first ghost convention was established in the year 2000.
It seems like the perfect venue for this. What do you think, Elizabeth?
Well, I think it's very good because it's not, penny dreadful stuff. It's actually a serious piece of work, and it's good to have it here in the jail. We don't promote the supernatural side of the jail, and we don't have sleepovers and we don't have parties and that. We have great respect for what happened here, because you have to remember that there was a great suffering here, and so we respect that. And also the spirits were here before we were, so it was their home first. So the ghost convention, it fits in with our ethos here.
What is the intention of the convention?
Well, a lot of people, if they've had supernatural experiences, are afraid, ashamed and embarrassed to come forward for fear of not being taken seriously. And for this reason, the World Ghost Convention was established to highlight that people who've had supernatural experiences are not alone in having their experiences. And we have a wonderful line of guest speakers who cover a broad, colourful assortment of supernatural topics. And also people have the opportunity to express their views in the paranormal or share their own personal supernatural experiences if they so wish, and also hear the experiences of other people as well. So it's very comforting in that sense.
Yeah.
A lot of people who send on their experiences now to Richard from all over the world, a lot of them wouldn't want to give their names. They want to remain anonymous for that reason, because they fear that they would be laughed at or ridiculed. And this is the whole reason why the convention was established in the first place, to give people a sense of comfort and that they're not alone in these experiences if they've had them themselves.
There was one of the speakers last year at the convention, Helen Barrett, and somebody had sent me photographs, a tourist who had taken photographs, and when they were developed they got more than they had photographed, and they sent them to me, and I showed them to Helen when she was up for the conference. And before she even came into the building, Helen could tell me where this photograph was taken, and I had noted in the diary the date that the photograph was taken, and she said, I said, well, why after 14 years would we suddenly see this and nobody else had ever seen it? And she said it might have been an anniversary of the person's death or something like that. So every time I go out every month now to see have they reappeared, but they haven't been seen since. So it's probably like echoes coming back every now and then. So not somebody who's resident here, but just like shadows or echoes that come so often.
Yes, I wanted to bring that up. Thank you for mentioning that, because I think often what people misconstrue as hauntings, as ghosts, really are just echoes from the past. For example, if you walk into a room where people have been arguing, they can leave the room and you can still feel it. You can feel the discord in the room. We can all feel it. This is a real thing, and I think that people often are feeling echoes from the past and mistake that for ghosts. And I was wondering what both of you ladies think about that.
Well, I wouldn't be an expert in that area, but I'm sure that people would feel that, as you say, yes indeed.
Especially if there's strong emotions, as I'm sure occurred here in a jail, where men, women, and children were incarcerated.
Yes, yes.
What do you think, Elizabeth?
Well, I definitely think that there are many echoes here.
Yeah.
You know, for the last few months we haven't seen anybody, but we've heard people. So it comes and goes. There isn't somebody who's regularly here. The other thing is too, that anytime we introduce any sort of new technology, it's always investigated. So there is a connection, very definitely. I know nothing about science, but there is a connection about energy and spirit world, always investigated. But again, nothing damaged, nothing, you know, I wouldn't be able to live here if there were horror stories.
So they are, at the end of the day, we're talking about people.
People, and we're sharing a space.
Right. I always like to say the ghosts are really your Uncle Ernie. I mean, that's who the ghost is more often than not.
Wouldn't like to bring it that close.
Now, Catherine, with the speaking of the Ghost Convention, now is that correct? Because I have Ghost Festival and Ghost Convention.
Well,
What's
actually,
correct?
it's the World Ghost Convention, and this is the 7th World Ghost Convention this year, and it's part of the Irish Ghost Family Festival. And as I said, it was the first Ghost Convention was such a tremendous success that it became part of the Irish Ghost Family Festival. And there's various in the festival itself. There's various events. For theatrical performances and plays and ghostly workshops throughout the Cork City, all with a supernatural theme, and the World Ghost Convention then is held here in the Cork City Jail.
We are spirits. Hopefully, when our time comes, we will just naturally and effortlessly move up to the higher side, but not everyone is so lucky. Some people have traumatic experiences,
Yes.
and they are confused, they're traumatized, and they need some help.
Yes, absolutely.
So
yes,
I would
indeed.
think that that's certainly a focus, is to help these people
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
to move to
indeed.
the higher side,
Yes, indeed.
and to bring information to people. People think of ghosts and they get a certain picture in their mind, and it's not necessarily the right picture.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Just to make them, as I say, to make ghosts your friends, and to make it more, give people the opportunity, especially if they've their own experiences. Sharing is very important, and that would give people a sense of comfort. That's the whole reason behind the convention itself.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. I think that the jail is well worth a visit. It's a very interesting place, fascinating from a historical point of view, not just from a spirit point of view. And the World Ghost Convention, if only we had known, we would have planned our trip for a little bit later this year, but maybe we'll make it next year.
Oh, absolutely.
Who
Yes,
knows?
indeed. Yes, indeed.
You'll be here in spirit.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Yes, we will. Thanks, ladies.
You're welcome.
You're watching The Third Eye Show.
The law of attraction is very interesting. We've heard the movie The Secret in the media for months and months, and it's a wonderful, wonderful movie. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. I've been watching it consistently. I think I watched it over 20 times, and each time it gives me a new message. What I've learned recently is that the joy and the happiness has to come first, and that is the fuel for our attraction to prosperity and abundance. We can't wait for the prosperity to come first and then feel the joy and the happiness. We have to find first the happiness. And for everyone, it's different. For every person, it's different. What makes you happy? Marianne Williamson has a wonderful poem that talks about the joy and the bigness, and it serves the universe for us to play big. It doesn't serve us to play small. So the more we can open our hearts to really bringing in the joy and the happiness, the goodness, the balance in our lives, the more the universe will grant us all of our wishes. And that's the key. God is there, the universe is there to answer our every need. The question is, how much will we allow in? I don't know about you guys, but there are times in my life when I don't allow a lot in. And I have to take a look at that and see, where am I stopping the flow, the ebbs and flow of money to come in? And all we have to do is look at our history and see. There are good times, there are bad times, and we've all gone through that. I'm a mother, a single mom, and when I first got divorced, my daughter was 2 years old, and I was begging God every day, just show me the way to put food on the table. And I was scared. And in that space of being scared, I couldn't create. As a co-creator, we need to be open and joyful and feel the prosperity in order to create it. And only when I was able to open up my heart and feel more secure that the universe would take care of me, and take care of my child, was I able to create that prosperity. As soon as the heart closes, so does the manifestation. So we need to work on keeping the heart open and looking at outside our window and looking at the abundance that God has created. Most days I put out little pieces of food for the birds, and I just look at them and how they come and they take the fruit from the floor and eat it and fly away. They're not worried about where their next meal is going to come. They know that the universe is going to provide for them. Do we feel the same way? I know that from living 48 years on this planet, that there wasn't a time that I didn't feel fear, unfortunately. And that fear closes down the creation of new and exciting things in our lives. And we need to continually feed the prosperity through joy and happiness. Whether it's walking outside in the forest and enjoying the greenery, or it's bringing friends and family into our homes and feeling the love and the abundance there. Anything that feeds opening up the heart and knowing, fully knowing that we are here being taken care of by beings that we don't see and being supported by them, just like the animals in the forest. The next meal is guaranteed to us, whether it is in food or it's in love or it's anything else that we need. As long as we're open up to the creation and the manifestation, it will happen effortlessly, in joy. I've been working with a financial coach for a few months, Karen Curry, and she has on her website a beautiful manifestation of abundance. Go to her website, take a look at it. It's going to be posted on the show's website, joyfulmission.com, and bring it in. Just know that you're special. Know that the universe is supporting you. You are entitled to everything that is good, everything that your heart desires. It's just there for you. Reach out and grab it and bring it in. Just like you do little pieces of your soul that you've let go of before, bring it in. Just take it in. And when we know that we're entitled to everything that the universe has to offer, we will create it. Points of reference to know where you're blocked will be, where do you get agitated? What is not sitting right for you? I know that when I was doing renovations in my home, it was during a very abundant time in my life. And I was redoing 2 bathrooms, and it was a very interesting process. There was a lot of stops and starts with it, contractors coming in and out of my house, and I was ordering all these fixtures and tile, and they were 2 small bathrooms, and I took a step back and I said, how can I put so much money into a bathroom? And I felt sort of a block. And then I realized, if I create this place of peace and harmony and share it with other people, then I've done what Kabbalah says is natural to the world. Ask and you shall receive. However, share it with others so that other people can enjoy it as well. And then the universe is open to you for everything that you need. And at that time, when I was able to look at it in that perspective, everything sort of opened up. And I've created a bathroom that's an oasis in my house. My home is open to other people, and I love living where I live. And I've created my businesses in my home. So upgrading it and creating that warmth and abundance where I live has created for me such happiness that I can't even express it. So it's the little things in life that I find are so powerful and to be able to share that with people when they come into my home and they feel happiness and peace, and they come in for healings from all kinds of wonderful healers around the world. I don't know of a more abundant way of living. So I just think it's the best thing. I do a lot of work in abundance. I think that the way we feel and think about money is critical. If we can bring that to our communities, talk about money, open that Pandora's box, and express ourselves, we will bring true healing to this universe that is so desperately needed. Money's the key. The more we have, the more we can share, the more we can help other people. It's critical in the spiritual community to open our minds and our hearts open to the energy and the ebbs and flow of money. I will support that in everything that I do. Creating a portal to help spiritual businesses create in abundance and in prosperity, going back to the round table effect of where people are joining together in mutual abundance, networking together, sharing information, and creating businesses that work and nourish us to create true healing in the world. That's what we need to achieve, individually and collectively, so that we can stop the rapid approach to bankruptcies and other forms of finances that just, they don't work anymore. So I welcome everybody to take a look at the website, take a look at the information, tell me how I can help you. I have many resources that can assist you, and feel abundant. That's all I can tell you. Go feel abundant, whatever that means for you. Take off your shoes, walk in the grass, feel how that feeling of the grass tickling your toes, and bring in that joy from the feet up to your heart, and expand it and bring in that energy of abundance and prosperity, including money in your life.